Hey, welcome. Today we're going to talk about a movie, an Italian movie called Regine, or The Queens. Again, I don't speak Italian, so I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but it's called The Queens. Here's the Italian poster. And for once, I actually prefer the American poster better. So there's the American poster. In English-speaking countries, it was released as Queens of Evil. So, as you may be able to tell by the music and the poster here, this is kind of like a hippie horror movie. Now, it does fall into this trap where it is a horror movie, but it doesn't really feel like a horror movie, except for at the beginning and at the end. It's one of those movies where the horror all comes during the climax, which I'm not a huge fan of, as you may have figured out by now. But this was still pretty well done. And I will say that at the beginning, it had a very good setup that made it really feel unique. So, how does this movie start out? This movie starts out by having this hippie guy, who you can see down here, right here, okay? This guy, or actually, you can see him better here. He's riding his bike, okay? He's riding his motorcycle. You can actually, if you listen closely, you can hear the motorcycle in the song. He's riding his motorcycle. It's daytime, then it's nighttime. He comes across a guy that is pulled over, broken down on the side of the road. The guy who's broken down is in a suit. He looks to be quite wealthy. And we have this hippie guy who doesn't seem to have anything to his name besides his bike and whatever clothes he happens to be wearing right now. So he stops to help the guy. Guy says he had some kind of problem. Hippie guy goes and looks under his hood. Says he can fix it in 5 minutes, which is amazing, but that's what he says. And the guy says that he's grateful. Then he asks him, like, oh, what do you do, or what are you up to, or whatever. And the hippie guy is like, well, I don't know, I'm just kind of going wherever the road takes me type deal. And the guy's like, oh, you don't have a job? And he's like, no, I'm just kind of going out there, you know. And so the guy, like, starts belittling him and saying that he is what's wrong with the world today, and so on and so forth. He doesn't have a job, he has no direction in life, and this and that. And the guy literally says he's looking for free love and just wants to go, like, find women and love them, but, like, not just one, you know, just kind of like every woman he can find. And the rich guy's like, oh, that's no good. Anyway, he's working on the guy's car, and the rich guy takes a giant, like, 9-inch nail and just spikes it into the front tire of the motorcycle. And the hippie guy doesn't see, so he fixes the guy's car. Guy drives away, and then he gets on his motorcycle, and of course doesn't, like, work properly because he's got a giant nail in there. But somehow he can still ride it. Now I maybe I missed it, but, like, I guess he took the nail out, and I guess he just rode on a completely flat tire. And then he was somehow able to catch up with the guy that's driving. And then he starts arguing it with him, like, on the highway at night. And then during this argument, while they're both driving however many miles per hour, the older guy, like, runs off the road and crashes and dies. And then the police come, or the hippie guy starts to ride away on his bike, and then sees police and he gets spooked. So then he dips off the road and then finds a shack, and he sleeps in the shack. And then when he wakes up, he finds these 3 women who are sisters, and they invite him into breakfast. Now it turns kind of into like a Hansel and Gretel type story, except it would just be Hansel and, like, 3 witches or whatever. Although they don't really seem like witches, but they bake him, like, 6-layer cakes, multiple 6-layer cakes, and they have that for breakfast. Then the whole middle of the movie is just kind of whatever. Like he gradually ends up having sex with each of these three women, and it starts really getting boring. And there is slight hints of the supernatural going on, like a little bit. And then at the very end, like within the last 8 minutes, they end up going to a party in a castle in the woods. And at the party is it's a whole bunch of, I believe they referred to themselves as members of high society. And by the time they got to this point, I just really hadn't decided that it's not at all a horror movie, because other than like kind of the guy dying at the beginning, there's not really anything dark about the movie. But they ramp it up at the end, and here's the big spoiler. But what they end up doing is he basically confesses to the three sisters that he is obsessed with all three of them, never wants to leave them, and he's so happy being in their presence that he could die. Then as soon as he says that, they transform into slightly uglier versions of themselves, I guess to make them look like witches. The makeup effects weren't very good. One of them has a knife, one of them has a hook, and one of them has an axe. And they hack him they hack him up. Again, the effects aren't very good, so basically they just covered him in blood. Like, they didn't show any cuts or anything. It just was bloody. And then they threw him in a grave and then buried him. And then the guy who, the guy who supposedly died at the beginning comes back, and we realize that he is the witch leader. And apparently they need to make the sacrifice of the poor people once in a while, and that is like how they keep their witch society going. They do not say the word witch in the movie, but you can tell that they have some kind of supernatural powers. And the French title for this movie, which I don't speak French, but it's something like Les Sorciers, something like that. It means the witches in French. So I think they're supposed to be witches. Yeah, so overall, I give this one a 6 out of 10. It's not super striking. The first 10 minutes of it really did grab me. After that, it got pretty boring. And but I guess witches killing a guy with a knife, a hook, and an axe is enough to call it a horror movie. But it's not a very obvious horror movie. But yeah, this was an Italian-French co-production. Le Regine, or The Queens of Evil. See you next time.